Okay, we're now going to continue with completing the square. So changing standard form quadratics into vertex form. So what happened again when we have an a value? Remember, we're going to factor that out of the first two terms. So even though there's no last or third term, no constant, no c, we're still going to factor the a term, the entire value of 5, from both of these terms. So I want you to pause the video, go ahead and factor it, and then come back when you want to check your answers. Alright, so now as we continue this equation, remember that we're factoring out that 5. Okay, so we're factoring the 5, we're left with 5 bracket x squared. Then instead of having plus 10x, we're going to have plus 2x. Alright, so the next line, you're thinking, and you could do this in, you could do this in 2 steps, or you could do it in 1 step, but you're going to now decide, okay, what are we going to add and subtract? So off on the side you're thinking half of 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1, so we're going to add 1 and we're going to subtract 1. Okay, so now the next line, remember, we're factoring out that subtracting 1. So when we take out that subtracting 1, we have to multiply by the 5 outside. Okay, so the next line we have y equals 5 bracket. We can factor what's in the bracket, which remember is going to be x, and then half of the middle term, so x plus 1 in brackets squared, and then we simplify what's outside, which would be minus 5. So from this, okay, we can now see, sorry, let me redo that. We can now see that the vertex is going to be a -1, -5. And what's your A pattern? Our step pattern is a 5. So a vertical stretch of 5. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead, work on example 3, and then press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, so now remember we're factoring out of the first 2 terms, so you should end up having y equals the -3. Instead of plus 12x, you're going to have minus 4x. Alright, remember you've divided positive 12 by the -3. So we get -3 times -4 will give you plus 12. Leave the last term, the -4. So we have y equals our -3 bracket, our x squared, x squared, don't know why that's not working, minus our 4x, minus 4x, and now half of 4 divided by 2. Okay, so take 4, divide by 2, we get 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 and subtract 4, and you still have your minus 4 outside. Okay, so when you have now factored this, remember that you're going to have your minus 4, your plus 4 in brackets, and now when we take out the -3 times the -4, it will subtract the -4. Okay, so y equals our -3. We're going to go ahead and factor this. Oops. So we have x minus 2 because it's half of -4 squared, and then we have plus 12 minus 4, which simplifies to 8. Okay, so we can see that you have a vertex of a +2, 8, and a step pattern or an A value of -3. So a vertical flip opening down with a step pattern of 3, 9, 15, a vertical stretch of -3. Okay, now try example 7, y equals x squared plus 5x minus 4. And you notice that although we're not factoring out an A value, you're not necessarily going to have a nice number that's added and subtracted. So go ahead and try this. I prefer you leave it in fraction form, but because you're dividing by 2 and squaring, you will get nice decimals. All right, so remember we're looking at the first two terms. So we're taking 5, we're dividing it in half, so we get 2.5 squared. So we're going to add and subtract 6.25. Okay, so now we've added and we've subtracted 6.25. We take the subtraction outside. So we're saying -6.25 plus a -4 gives us -10.25. And when we factor the perfect square inside, it's always going to end up being half of the middle term or the square root of the last term with the same middle sign. Okay, so we can see now from this that our vertex is going to be at a -2.5 and a -10.25 with an A value of 1. Okay, so there's no flip, no stretch, no compression. All right, now I want you to try 2 more examples. Okay, so try example 8, pause it, and then press play when you're ready. Okay, so remember when we factor out the -2 from the -2x squared and the +7, we ended up being left with x squared minus 3.5x inside the bracket. So we're taking half of the -3.5 and squaring that to add and subtract. So we're saying 1.75 squared, added, and subtracted. So that gives us 3.0625. But remember, when we take the subtraction out, we have to multiply by the A value in front. So we're saying -2 times the subtraction. So that will give us plus 6.125 added to 4. So we can see from our factored perfect square, we get the vertex form of y equals -2 bracket x minus 1.75 bracket squared plus 10.125, giving us a vertex at 1.75 comma 10.125 with an A value of -2. All right, so the very last example I have for you is with a decimal A value. So go ahead, pause the video, try factoring this by yourself, putting it into vertex form, and then press play to check your answer. All right, so notice when you factored out the -0.5 from your first two terms, your minus 3x is actually going to become plus 6x because we divided 3 by 0.5. All right, so we actually made it bigger. So now we're taking half of 6 and squaring it, so we're adding 9 and subtracting 9. Remember, when you take the subtraction out, you need to multiply by the A value. So -0.5 times the -9, that will give you a plus 4.5. So when you factor your perfect square, you get x plus 3 in brackets squared, and then you can simplify what's outside. So we can see that we have a vertex of -3, 7.125 with an A value of -0.5, so opening down with a vertical compression of 0.5. So go ahead, complete a couple more practice problems. Okay, and those practice problems preparing for your quiz can be by completing the Tarja puzzles if you haven't yet finished them. But remember, go through your examples, and that will prepare you for the quiz on completing the square. And then tomorrow night you'll watch the video for 6.2.